Broadway will stop at nothing to find material for a musical. From a 2-day student riot, to Russian pogroms against the Jews, to Spider-Man, to a Roger Corman horror B-movie. I suppose it shouldn't be all that surprising that they would turn to the greatest adventure movie of all time for inspiration either. Or that they did it twice. What is rather astonishing is that both times were just awful. And that raises a question about whether it is even possible for a King Kong musical to be good. The first attempt at a musical Kong looks really good on paper. 1998's animated film, The Mighty Kong, came in the wake of the Disney Renaissance, and starred the Little Mermaid herself, Jodie Benson, as the voice of Anne Darrow. The biggest innovation of the Disney Renaissance was the application of the Broadway musical style to Disney's animated films. While Disney animated films always had music, they were rarely in the particular Broadway style of musical. Arguably, Disney's earliest Broadway-style musical was Mary Poppins, which was itself a response to the Broadway-style musical films that had become popular through the 1940s and 1950s thanks to the likes of Judy Garland and Gene Kelly. But Mary Poppins was 1965. That style wouldn't come to animation until the 1980s. But once it did, it was a huge hit and defined Disney's animated films for another decade. The Mighty Kong also boasted music by the Sherman Brothers, Robert and Richard Sherman, who are responsible for your childhood soundtrack. The esteemed duo did the music for Mary Poppins, The Parent Trap, Sword in the Stone, The Jungle Book, The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, That Darn Cat, Bedknobs and Broomsticks, The Aristocats, Charlotte's Web, Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, and numerous Disney theme park attractions, including It's a Small World, The Enchanted Tiki Room, Adventure Through Inner Space, Journey into Imagination, and The Carousel of Progress, as well as numerous pop songs, including those of Annette Funicello. With those credentials, you'd think The Mighty Kong would be a fantastic film. You'd be wrong. The biggest problem is that despite having Disney-level talent, it was not a Disney-level film. The animation is strictly TV, direct-to-video quality. Furthermore, the version freely available on YouTube has been cropped from its original 4:3 aspect ratio to make it widescreen, ironically making it feel cramped. The plot is a kid's version of the original film, and as I've said many, many times, you cannot improve upon perfection. There's basically no point to adapting the original King Kong because you cannot possibly do it better. That already sets any adaptations up for failure. The actors, including Lee Dudley Moore, phone in their performances, and the Sherman Brothers' music is okay, but a far cry from Mary Poppins. The recipe for redeeming this film would seem pretty straightforward. Better animation and better voice acting would elevate it immeasurably. It wouldn't be Beauty and the Beast, but it would be better. The second attempt at a King Kong musical is a more challenging fix. After 5 years of planning and 5 months of rehearsals, the King Kong stage musical debuted at the Regent Theatre in Melbourne, Australia, featuring score by Marius de Vries, lyrics by Michael Mitnick and Craig Lucas, who also wrote the book, which is what they call a script in musical theatre, ostensibly based on the public domain 1932 novelization. Esther Hannaford plays Anne Darrow, and Adam Lyon played Carl Denham, opposite a giant Kong marionette created by Creature Technology, who, among other things, produced animatronics for Universal's Jurassic World and Skull Island Rise of Kong rides, as well as the How to Train Your Dragon and Walking with Dinosaurs arena shows. And the overall effect was apparently successful, as its run was held over 3 times for a cumulative 9 months, between July 28, 2013 and February 16, 2014. This success brought Kong to Broadway in November of 2018, where it had 324 performances before closing in August of 2019, which puts it at the low end of the Broadway average of 9 months to 10 years. The book was rewritten by Marcia Norman and again by Jack Thorne, and the music reworked by Eddie Perfect. Now here's the thing. There would have been a lot of cachet to seeing a full-sized King Kong marionette playing out his story actually on Broadway in New York City. That much would have been pretty spectacular. Though clearly inspired by the 2005 version, this Kong is a scaled-up silverback in Art Deco style, which effectively leans into and transcends the limitations of the technology. We know he's a puppet, so make him a stylish puppet. And I certainly would have bought the plush in the gift shop afterwards. The problem is that you would have had to sit through the rest of the show. The incongruence between the music and the musical can be seen most clearly in what is supposed to be the show-stopping ballad, Full Moon Lullaby. The Melbourne version with Esther Hannaford actually sings this the way one would expect of a lullaby, where Ann Darrow is lulling the giant terror gorilla to sleep.
Troubles fade around you, the reefs they start to fly. Now sweet sleep has crowned you, full moon lullaby.
The Broadway version has Christiane Pitts belting it out as a terrible, declarative power ballad about how being kidnapped by the giant terror gorilla has helped her self-esteem.
I can't believe that I survived. So many questions in my mind. I'm asking, but there's no reply. This miracle, it leaves me wondering, why do I feel so alive? Right here at the top of the sky.
She doesn't express her feelings. She tells us what she is feeling. Sometimes she even tells us what she is doing.
He fought for me, he showed me a strength I never knew was inside.
Likewise, the Broadway version makes Kong's death an irritatingly selfish allegory for Anne's personal growth. The giant terror gorilla is savagely shot down by biplanes in a surprisingly effective scene, and she immediately launches into another terrible song about how he taught her to be defiant and to stand up against whatever nebulous them are holding her back. The acting, songs, and dialogue are as cringeworthy as the Stephen Colbert skit used to promote it.
I just always thought of, King Kong as being a male role.
Stephen, it's 2019. Open your mind.
And that really sums up the entire musical. Excellent effects contrasted against god-awful music and performances. How they accomplished a life-size Kong puppet and utilized a massive LED screen to simulate jungles, moonlit nights, cityscapes, and climbing skyscrapers is truly a spectacle. Everything else was execrable. So how would you fix it? Well, for one, scrap everything but the puppet. Next, decide what you're actually trying to do musically. The songs are a mixed bag of genres that want to be a hip, modern, Hamilton-esque musical despite being a 1930s period piece. And these songs have no tonally thematic through line. Many of the songs are downright inappropriate for the events that are unfolding, like the power ballad version of Full Moon Lullaby. So figure out what you're doing with the music. My personal suggestion, if you're going for something modern in a 1930s period piece, is electro-fusion music. For Skull Island, that would be variations on tribal techno and Afro house. For New York scenes, go in for electro swing. The two styles having a uniting thread in electronic music, but contrasting the tribal beats and the big band brass. Yes, you can have your Park and Bark ballads, but unite the scenes around them with a consistent musical style that draws from and uplifts the setting itself. Or skip going modern and just do a classic 1930s Broadway musical production. Go fully retro. The entire appeal of the concept is the postmodern meta of watching the story of King Kong on Broadway itself. One could even reenact Carl Denham's Broadway display of Kong in perfect fidelity, like the audience themselves are now part of the show. Indeed, a particularly talented writer could present the entire show this way. We are Denham's audience watching his show that reenacts his expedition to Skull Island. Once you figure out the musical style you're going for, rework the story. In a general sense, A good musical must be built around the music. The worst kind pause the story so that the characters can sing an unnecessary song. Movies whose scripts were written and then songs were inserted. My most hated musical is the aforementioned Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. You could edit the songs out completely, and not only would the film be perfectly intelligible, but would actually be shorter and better. Contrast that against my favorite musical, Nightmare Before Christmas, for which Danny Elfman wrote the music before the script. All the major action and character arcs happen in song, to the point that the film would be unintelligible if you cut out any of the music. For Kong specifically, the Broadway production is only ostensibly based on the 1932 novelization in the most broad and generous way. The Melbourne show retained the Skull Islanders. Broadway did not. Neither had dinosaurs. Unfortunately, that is a byproduct of scale. Your average theater is simply not capable of housing a full-size Kong and a full-size Tyrannosaurus, let alone Stegosaurus and Brontosaurus. Instead, they took a page from the 1976 version and had Kong fight a giant snake. But if they could use an LED screen to simulate Kong's fight with biplanes atop the Empire State Building, there's no reason they couldn't have used it to have him fight dinosaurs. That aside, the Broadway production decided to become instantly dated by making it an of-the-moment story about female empowerment. I mean, that's certainly a way to rewrite the story, though one that speaks too loudly of modern preoccupations and an urge to fix a perfectly good story because it doesn't reflect those preoccupations. That said, it would probably be strangely too much to ask for a straightforwardly traditional love story against the backdrop of a ferocious but sympathetic terror gorilla. I could see a good love song between Jack and Anne in the crow's nest of the Wanderer, to be reprised on the pinnacle of the Empire State Building. Though in the Melbourne version, Jack is absent entirely from the Broadway one. He's redundant in a story about a strong female character who don't need no man, especially in the end, when she is the one who screams at Kong to escape and rides him around like a war mount, because the line between a stereotypical strong female character and an actual supervillain is pretty thin. Either way, maybe it's not worth the time to do anything more than what Merian C. Cooper did. Just try to create a ripping yarn for a few hours' entertainment. So yes, simple solutions to these musicals. Just change everything and make it better. Thanks, Tips. Subscribe for more helpful insights into musical theater. Now to go back to my original question, is it even possible to make a good King Kong musical, considering that both efforts so far have been failures? And theoretically, the answer is yes. Or at least it's theoretically possible to have made both Kong musicals better. But ultimately, we must ask why one would make a King Kong musical anyway. I'm sure nobody could have predicted that a monolithic French doorstop about a minor 2-day riot over 200 years ago would have made one of the most enduring musicals of all time. So why not King Kong? But asking why not is not the same thing as asking why. Almost to a 1, reviews of King Kong on Broadway opined that the music was terrible, but the marionette was an impressive spectacle. Several reviews compared it to a theme park ride, and therein lies the problem. Kong is about spectacle. Yes, the human drama of Ann Darrow and Carl Denham anchors it, but there is no mistake that Merian C. Cooper was going in for cinematic spectacle. A terror gorilla, dinosaurs, a mysterious island, a giant wall, and a climax on top of the world's largest skyscraper at the time. And yes, Broadway can produce a certain sense of impressive scale, and some odd feats of special effects. I was as impressed by Bert in Disney's Mary Poppins musical walking up the sides of the stage as I was nonplussed by it dragging out every song into an overproduced Broadway number. Appealing to King Kong seems more like it was trying to create a spectacle for the benefit of selling Broadway tickets than it was some kind of vitally important new take on the story of King Kong himself. I suppose the parallels are obvious. If really all you have to sell it on is the spectacle, then why a musical? What you really want is a theme park ride, and the best possible King Kong theme park ride has already come and gone. Barring that, maybe do some kind of live King Kong arena show, like Walking with Dinosaurs. Making a good Kong musical just seems like a wholly unnecessary effort, too fraught with chance of yet another failure, though I'm certainly happy to be proven wrong.